Okay.
Good morning, friends. We're listening to the Regeneration Podcast. First time I think that we've probably recorded on a Sunday morning. I'll tell you why I'm free this morning is I went to in this part of my job where I direct migrant ministry for the diocese. There's these neat Mexican communities, there's Guatemalan, Ecuadorian. But last night I was at St. Juan Diego Church. And I was thinking of you, Michael, because it's just so unabashedly sociological. They're just gathering, and I don't know how to describe it. And maybe you've been to Mexico, and this is it's definitely a Mexican liturgy, but it's the whole thing is beautiful. It's just like business is transacted. Like a young couple comes in who haven't been there for a long time. You don't get this sense of scrupulosity about like you have to be there all the time. It's
Right.
community, and they understand that. So somebody comes in, they have a new baby. So all of a sudden you realize that they're gonna just march up. It's not a baptism behind an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe that somebody else brought to get blessed. And then something else is going on, and those people are kind of included. The priest is conducting business, Padre Jesus Flores, but it was the ubiquitous nature of Our Lady of Guadalupe. I had been there because some college students were uh, I run the Office of Campus Ministry. We're kind of doing some service work at this migrant center connected to a church, Juan Diego, and so they see people who aren't from the community, and it's just like, hey, have you heard the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe? Do
Oh,
you know
really?
Our Lady? Do you know Our Lady? Very different than I think South American Catholicism. Again, this seems very indigenous. It doesn't seem like blue blood, like a lot of South American Catholicism can be Spanish blue blood married in, and it's very kind of pious. This seems to be, a unique tertium quid, and it's in our country. It's right below the border, and it's a really beautiful thing. And I know, for me, I know it has something to do with the next if this is the death of one iteration of the Catholic Church, which is something I say a lot, this we don't have to look far. In other words, we don't have to look far. It's hidden in plain sight in one sense. Do you have any experience with that, or is so again, the ubiquitous nature of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Again, she's indigenous. She precedes everything. It's almost like she's the first thought. She's the
Right.
ground upon which people are gathering. Hey, do you, and then there's this great Christological focus in the Eucharist. It's not pietistic per se, but you would find it fascinating.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting. Well, no, I mean, not in a while.
yeah,
When I was in living in the Detroit area, we used to there is a town, there's a part of Detroit called Mexican Town, but I
okay,
think it's been overtaken by casinos in the meantime. And I think they had it was like a whole street of really, really good Mexican restaurants.
okay,
And we used to, and some of them were open to like till six. They were open 24 hours. I mean, you could get a really good meal. So I'd be playing gigs, and after the bar closed, we'd go to Mexican Town because we knew we can get a good meal.
yeah,
And but in that part of now, it's not like that anymore. I don't think that part of Detroit had a really strong Mexican presence, like what you're talking about. And
yeah,
there was a big mural of Our Lady of Guadalupe on one of the buildings.
yeah.
And also there was I mean uh, all the kind of ethnic enclaves in Detroit have either been turned into casinos or now they're Islamic centers.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
And they were all like strongly Catholic. There was a Polish area, an Irish area, and they all have really beautiful churches, but demographics change over time. And the funny thing is with Our Lady of Guadalupe, my my wife's friend here in town, another farmer. She's not Catholic and she's not Christian, I don't think. I don't think she would
Mhm.
consider herself
Yeah. It doesn't seem to
Christian.
be a prerequisite.
But
Yeah.
she's got a big tattoo of Our Lady of Guadalupe in her leg.
I wonder how it plays for the Pentecostals in Mexico. But go ahead.
And my wife said, "Well, what?" When they met, she said, "Are you Catholic?" Because no, I just like the picture.
Uh-huh.
She didn't know what it was. Now
Yeah,
she's marked for life. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Again, it's a very different phenomenon. I think I've mentioned on this one. Marian apparitions have. I've read a lot about a lot of them, not individual ones, but like histories of them. I guess early on, I just thought like, what the hell are these things? What does it mean? So on my honeymoon, I'm sure I've mentioned Amy and I went, way up this windy road to La Salette, France, 1846, way up in the Alps. And
Yeah,
it's a small shrine, but and again, like springs interests me. Mary speaking in the local patois, not the imposed grammar of the nation state.
right.
Village tells that story, and she, solar noon is very interesting. It's almost mind blowing, Michael. It's almost mind blowing, that these
It is.
resonances, right?
It is.
Um, and again, I think this notion of that the Catholicism emerging should have the geographical shape of something like what used to constitute beer culture. I've mentioned that recently. Like probably the size of Western New York. What we'd say. And
Hmm.
Michigan, like you studied the Native American presence. Like what's the spiritual shape of those lands? Diocese should probably take on, in some aspects. And again, we're on the day we're proceeding this week the Day of the Dead, which will be huge for these Mexican churches. And
Yeah.
again, some of these are the poorest of the poor, milkers. All milkers are Mexicans or Guatemalans. And that's mostly what I'm working with, but there's also Mexican communities in Rochester. But the Day of the Dead, the fact that every celebration is totally local, Michael, that the symbols brought up in processions with conch shells and the skulls, there's
Right.
commonalities, but there's certain flower symbols, almost heraldic, I would say, that are
Hmm.
quite unique to regional. And I could be getting some of this wrong, but it's what I've learned and it's what I'm seeing. And again,
No,
in all those ways, it's pointing a way forward.
no. Well, we could. I think that's true, but I think it's also not true
Tell me.
because all those parishes I mentioned in Detroit, for instance, 100 years ago, they were just like that. They're not like that now.
All right, let's make it rural rather than urban. We know
No,
that church
it's just
renewal
a
comes
matter
from
of
rural areas, right?
no, it's just a matter of immigrant waves. So the
Oh, sure.
immigrants for like a generation or so, generation and a half, will maintain their folk customs in a new land.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it just kind of gets flattened, kind of like the radio. Stay with me, ladies and gentlemen, with while I
Uh-huh.
tease out this analogy. Like, remember when we were kids and you would drive across the country or even just across the state,
Mhm.
and the accents would change on the radio, right?
Right.
They don't do that anymore. I was just
Yeah.
in North Carolina last weekend. Trying to listen to the radio just to do something while I had this long drive. And
Used to be so exciting, wasn't it?
it was kind of cool, right?
It was cool. It was
But
very
now
cool.
everything's flattened across the entire spectrum of the radio, if you, at least in the United States.
Yeah.
And I think you could say the same thing for the liturgical practices of the Catholic Church, which are also
Yes.
flattened across.
It's monoculture.
Yeah, it's monoculture and it's corporate, if that makes any sense.
And the idea of left versus
One
right is
size
another
fits
thing.
all,
Yeah.
right?
It's another thing where the stupid dialogue between left and right, which is another obsession of mine lately, researching that temperamental thing I always talk about. But it's one of these things where left and right washes out the local, right? That's a big theme of Front Porch Republic in one sense. That they got us arguing about the Latin Mass and the Novus Ordo, and the tertium quid that gets lost is again a liturgy that shows local variants, and again, like this rural Mexican Catholicism does. And I'm not saying we should preserve that, because to preserve it would be to museumify it, right, which is dead. But it has some of the themes that if we listen, your book, I've been turning to some of your poetry, and I know you spoke about it at a recent conference, but on your poetry on the wild and what you do with your land and phenomenology. But we're all going to have to do that. And again, if we get outside, I think this Catholicism will emerge, but it's not going to come from our head. I'm talking about it theoretically now, some things I've learned, but I'm not saying, it's not an imposition that we create a parish, left braining using some themes from Mexican Catholicism. It's
Right.
people gathering and celebrating the local realities.
But I think the general rule, I mean, I think your Mexican immigrants there are an exception to the rule, but the rule is bureaucratic Catholicism. I mean, as far as the
Yeah,
institution itself goes.
sure.
And That's got to die. But that's
Yeah,
how it is. I mean, I think right now, I mean, we're at like this kind of weird threshold across the world, I think, and in every domain of that kind of bureaucratic approach to things. Uh, well, it's certainly showing a few signs of strain, but I think
sure.
it's also, out of and what happens when the bureaucrats start to panic when they realize they're not going to have a job.
Mhm.
Right? So I think they're in a state of panic right now. And to preserve control, or at least the way things have been, and it's just yuck. I mean,
I think whether it's in hospitals, schools, the church, the country, I think what you're saying is 100% true. And that's what I think this epical shift, the kind of the astrological age of, these 1,000-year things or 2,000-year things. I'm not trying to, even in the tone of voice,
uh-huh.
people hear that and they think scaremongering is going to be there. No, 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 no. So take the horizontal of a bubbling cauldron and then make it vertical. And you see these bubbling things. We have to, as we move through time from the spatial metaphor to the temporal one, we're going to see things growing and things dying, and we have to nurture the things. But it's like this stuff seems to be dying in real time. I think it's going to take some help. I'm not encouraging passivity, but I can smell lots of the newness already. I really can. You know,
Yeah, but I mean, but it's and I think about this question all the time myself, right? And
how would you frame the question to yourself?
um I think well, it's like we're among zombies, or
Mhm.
they live. We're in the they live state of the church.
A lot of it. Yeah.
And but I think, because I ask people this a lot, like Catholics, I'll ask, and I think I got into an argument with somebody this week, maybe not an argument, but a discussion, and I was surprised that they didn't see it like that. And at that conference, I actually brought it up as well quite a bit. Is that people think when they say the Catholic Church, for instance, and and we say that in actually in other denominations as well. We'll talk about the church. Now, and it's easier thing to tease out when you're talking to like a Catholic and Orthodox and Protestant. What do you mean by the church? And they really can't come up with a definition that
Mhm.
pleases everybody,
Right.
right? But I think even just if you look just at just the Catholic Church, and if you ask people, what do you mean by the church? And the assumption is those guys in Rome. That's what they mean by
Yeah.
the church,
Yeah, I think so.
But that's not the church.
No.
Those are, I don't know, those are the bureaucrats
Hmm. Hmm.
running things. But that's what I think until that problem is out in the open,
So Illich gave us a metaphor
novel.
that's come up a lot, and I don't want the metaphor to reify it, but it's that institutional church is the skeletal structure. We're grateful to it, kind of like the rib cage. It's ossified by definition, kind of moves slow. It's conservative, but it's kind of preserved in that rib cage, preserved the ticking time bomb of the Gospels. I think they still have their say. All this talk now online is about the Bible, the Bible, the Bible.
Really?
Yeah, everybody's the Bible and Jesus, the Bible. It's not in the Bible, or
Well, even that, it's what do you mean by the Bible?
yeah. So the church preserved the Gospels, which is kind of where it's at, and we need those things that point to it. Um, and I can say more about that. But then the church has so that's the church as it. The church as she is this mystery, and including the human body again. If I cut the hair off my arm, at what point I remember the former abbot of the monastery doing that, John Utes Bamberger. Just telling college students like, where does my body end? And he's not trying to be a liberal would say, okay, everything's relative, and a conservative would say, right, it ends at your skin. These are temperamental things. But in the mystery, I think the church now it has with the people left with what happened in COVID and who that left remaining. It's a little more left-brained. It's as left-brained as it's ever been, and so it seems like the skeletal structure seems to characterize large swaths of the church. It's hard to talk about much else, but the when David Cayley was on talking about the paradoxical, it's almost painful. We were talking about Eugen Rosenstock Hussey, but even said this thing about kids being online, that God sows seeds in wild ways, right? And that this gospel has gotten out there. And, some people would posit now at the end of this epoch that maybe, and I think Hussey does himself, that this thing, the gospel, it could have been fertilized in India, just like this Oliver Donovan in Africa, the Catholic missionary. He could just take the gospel to the different tribes. He was the one who said, missions become a noun, not a verb. So he would go out and he said, wow, it would take me 6 weeks. I'll talk to the chief of the tribe. I'm going to give him the gist of it as I see. We know enough about language now where we don't need to impose their understanding or sleeping that, losing sleep worried that their word for bird is slightly different than our word for bird or something, right? No, you sow the seeds. You sow the seeds. And I think, we're going through an epoch that the institutional church has financial problems. There's something going on with the papacy. We don't really know, but there's something epochal. I'm using that word too much. I don't know what it is, but I think we need poets such as yourself we need to be gently shepherding this thing trying to be born. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, I just don't,
Yeah.
I and it's hard for me, to not get sucked into it that, it's very strange. It's very strange for me that, you know, phenomenology kind of ruined my friendships. Because but the thing is, and I meet these people, nice people. And for instance, at the school where my boys are going, uh, they had a convocation mass, which I loved when I was at Marygrove. It was like the one
Uh-huh.
Catholic thing we still did. There was a mass at the beginning of the school
That's cool. Mhm.
year, mass of the Holy Spirit. And so they had one at the school, and
What kind of school do your kids go to? Where are they going?
my
You don't
two
have to give a
youngest are
name.
going
Yeah.
to one of the Chesterton academies,
Oh, okay.
which because Bonnie ran out of gas for
Sure.
homeschooling after she had cancer.
Yeah.
And they like it. I mean, there's other kids there. It's not a huge school. I think there's
Yeah.
only 18 or 20 kids in the whole school, but
Very interesting.
they
We
have
have
fun.
we have one in Rochester. There's great people there.
Yeah. But the thing is, so at the mass, the teachers had to come in and take an oath to the magisterium. And there were a couple Catholic colleges like some years ago when I was looking for jobs, seeing if what was out there. And they looked like good places to work, but I think a couple of them required an oath to the magisterium. I'm like, I can't do that.
Mhm.
First of all, I don't know what you mean by a magisterium for one thing, and they could never tell me when I asked.
Mhm.
Um,
But you
but
could do it. I did it to teach with my mandatum. And I think, part of it for me, I can only speak in the first person, is that, the first thing I learned about canon law is just so different than like what we think of as law, right? In Rome, if you were on two country roads and there was a red light and there was no traffic coming, you go, right? That the law isn't an end. It's a means, it's to serve life, right? It points to the truth. And the last code of canon law, it's famously told, and I forget the wording, but it's like, all these things are there for the discretion of souls, do what you got to do, bro. And
yeah, I couldn't do
and
it
it
though.
doesn't play out that way in America. We've got like this German type of thing. We got scrupulosity meets German. So two of our big ethnicities, a good Italian Catholicism seems to be free of some of that stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, just the fact that that's a thing, right? Whether
Yeah,
you're
yeah, I get it. I get it. I do. My temperament, my temperament, I'm temperamentally, those things are not where I hang my hat.
right,
Now, I don't try to accumulate those things I've reduced my freedom to.
yeah.
It's not a hobby.
So anyway, but the thing is that it's
Yeah. But tell me
yeah,
more about like what you feel in your heart of hearts. I'm not vetting you for like, dude, we need you back in the fold. You had recently written about Paul Kingsnorth, kind of negatively. I do find some of these guys. I was asked to review. Well, let me ask you, the publishing business. If you were asked to review a book for like Front Porch Republic or something, you don't have to keep that secret, do you, or no?
That I rev oh, you mean that I edited
Like,
it?
yeah,
Or
no, no, no. Let's say it's, and this is not an important question, but if somebody asked you, like Front Porch asked me to review a book, I'm
right.
reading it and I'll write it. It's somebody we all know.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's fair game for me to talk about it, right? I'm not going to talk about my review, but the author and the name.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So Martin Shaw is coming out with a new book. It's awesome. And Jeff Bilbro at Front Porch. So I was just reading it, but I
Mhm.
was thinking, I like what he has to say about Jesus. He's Orthodox. I've got to get into that more.
He's
King's
not
North.
as orthodox as
No, no, no. Okay, I think we both agree on that. Okay,
mhm.
yeah,
I mean,
because I think King's
he's
North
harder to
Orthodoxy is weird to me.
it's going to be hard to keep that dog on the porch.
Yeah, yeah.
You know
Okay, we agree.
what I'm
That's
saying?
exactly what I was smelling out.
Yeah,
But he joined something.
he
So how
did.
do you position yourself vis-a-vis? Um, Hey, you don't need to compare yourself to anybody. But again, I think there's changes in the church. I don't think you've ever said you left the church. You could say the church left you. Give us some of the language you're thinking about now. But like for me, we've seen this before. The church dies and it comes back to the people like at the French Revolution when Lamennais wrote his stuff and people were converting. They had
Yeah.
been Catholic at one point. It's all fuzzy.
Well, it is all fuzzy.
What do you
And
see your role as during this time? Things are going on.
well, I don't know. I mean, I can't I can't think of myself as not Catholic.
Okay.
Even when I was not practicing as a Catholic in my 20s, most of my 20s. Um, I couldn't, I mean, that just,
It's because you are Catholic,
it's in the
Michael.
grain, right? I
Yeah,
can't, I,
yeah.
and
Not
I
as a brand
couldn't,
name. Yeah.
and actually, to tell you the truth, even though I spent 25 years in the Byzantine Catholic Church, and I think this is what I learned from the Ortho Bros, is I realized, I'm never going to be Eastern. I am never ever going to
Yeah.
be Eastern. I mean, it just psychologically,
Yeah.
it's beautiful liturgy. I mean, love the liturgy. You know, I get the appeal of the liturgy, and
Yeah.
and I love so much about the theology. But just, culturally, I'm basically a medieval Catholic, you know. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Um, I feel like I'm in no man's land.
But you're a Catholic, and I would say the skeletal structure is asking you to, we're getting there. There's a medical clinic in the diocese, and I kind of liaison with them. And it's a great place. I forget its name. The Christians, it'll come to me. Dr. Angela Christen and Deacon Michael Christen, they set it up. And I think when they were looking to get money for it, and they just kind of a more holistic way of looking at things, a good kind of Catholic worldview, they were looking for what type of official relationship they'd have with the diocese, and the bishop was just like, go be Catholic. And again, he's Italian. Go be
Mhm.
Catholic. That's part of the thing we're going through. As mothers, there's two forms of mother church. There's Rapunzel who locks her kid in a tower, whereas there's a mother who educates educare to send free. And you're one of these seeds that Mother Church has kind of set out and you're planted. You talk about your land and things like this, but I can't imagine that there's not something and you're a leader and you're obviously doing neat things. You're writing, you're speaking, you put your ideas out there, but like the skeletal structure like needs you now. And they because the newness is probably not going to come from the skeletal structure. And yet I
No.
do believe they join up again. I do believe that the ability for modern hospitals in an alternative but similar world, their ability to like if somebody was in a car wreck to chop them up and put them back together, it's kind of cool. That's going to meet with a new Hildegard of Bingen herbology. I
Mhm.
don't think right now they're going to be parallel tracks. One was used to be total dominant in the age of systems, hospitalized medicine, Illich, but all of a sudden the other's coming back. And they're going to need a more fruitful dance in the future. What is that going to look like? You'd be equipped to do that. But you're also equipped to think through your book, The Radical Catholic Reimagination of Everything. But you're writing a lot of books. I would want to know, and this isn't a challenge, and you're the farthest thing from lazy. But like somebody who works in the institutional church, I'd say, like, boy, we need you people who've grown up, you were baptized, you kind of know the thing. We had our fights, Um, and we're struggling right now for newness, and would love to
Well,
join up in the future. I don't know.
well, I think my experience, right? So the corporate, let's call it the corporate church,
Okay.
which is a demonic parody of the body of Christ, which is corpus, right?
It can be. I mean, Illich
It
played with
is.
that. Yeah, that's worse. When the blood's actually not running through the veins at all. It's a, for me, it's a both and. It's a,
Yeah. Um, which is an interesting word. I mean, the whole etymology with corporate and corpus, right?
yeah.
And it it strikes me that the bureaucracy, yeah, wants newness, but it's kind of like that scene in ever see What About Bob?
Yeah, it's a great movie.
I love the movie, but there's a scene where Bob is teaching the kid Siggy how to dive.
Swimming. Yeah, yeah, it's great.
And even though the father, the psychoanalyst, had been trying to teach his son to dive for like years, and the kid's not going to dive, and so Bob's out there teaching him, and the kid finally, and the kid dives finally, and then the old man runs out of the house. I'll take it from here, Bob. That's like the church, right? So, in a
I think
way,
it's good. I
people
think it's good.
people practicing the wild of God are like Bob, who's just
Yeah,
crazy,
yeah.
right? Neurotic and a mess, but he kind of he's living right in the world. And then they rush in and they want to take over, right? I'll take it from here. And that I think there's a social truth there. And
Totally.
and I think you see this through history, right? Is and then, I mean, take myself out of it, but all these practices that arose, especially in the Middle Ages, but all through history. Well, my wife showed me this morning a trailer for a film in French about Saint Mary Margaret Alacoque or Margaret
Yeah,
Mary Alacoque,
yeah, yeah, yeah. She's great.
and
Her
and the
feast
Sacred
day was
Heart,
just
right?
like the week before last. Yeah.
And it looked pretty cool. And I know a little French, but they talk too fast for me to catch everything.
Yeah, but you need an institutional church, just one thing to like name a cool thing like the Sacred Heart and put it on a calendar. It's really awesome.
Well, it is, but the thing is, and that's more of a. I think that was that the 1800s, the 17,
I think it was late 1700s.
late so, um,
No, 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 no. Earlier than that. I honestly believe I think it was late 1600s.
Oh, is it really? Okay.
Yeah.
But you look at things like that, or even look like Fatima, if you want to go more recent history, or the devotion to the Rosary, or actually the devotion to the Virgin,
hmm
which it seems to me a lot of those things started not with the laity, but on the lowdown, on the close to the ground, like you were talking earlier,
Absolutely.
with the Virgin speaking to the people in their local patois, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I and
That was the beginning of this epoch we're going to start building. We need to, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
We need to
but
tell those stories.
here's the thing. I don't really think the bureaucracy wants that.
But how about isn't there a paradox? I think Graham Greene
Like
had
the
this
arrival of the Messiah. They want it and they don't want it.
totally,
Right.
100%. They would hate to give it up. But like even the paradox between papal infallibility. It's not a thing that's used a lot, but when you look at the dogma, the Assumption, the Immaculate Conception, it's really they were liberating. Those were popular devotions. So this
Hmm.
paradox of using almost like autocratic power to just like democracy contains the seeds of its own destruction, right? You can vote
Hmm.
in a Trumpian character, but the complaint about the church, the Pope, these are some of the paradoxes she, capital She,
Yeah.
is kind of working out. And that the patois, the big one, even in Our Lady of or Song of Bernadette, is how she told Bernadette, and the movie I believe captures this. I remember you can picture a young girl, and she likes she likes a lollipop, and her parent can say, like,
Hmm.
no, you don't like that lollipop. The parent's thinking of the calories or the sugar. And the girl will look at you and say, I like the lollipop. Right. And that's
Hmm.
powerful. I love that spirit in people. And society does nothing more than crush that spirit out, by the way. But if I'm right, like Bernadette, right, she said that Mary told her, I am the Immaculate Conception.
Right.
And the church wanted to change that and did actually change it, right? And just like Tomberg says in the Parade of Our Lady of All Nations from Amsterdam, the church forced a correction in what, like we say, the apparition was valid, but Mary prayed wrong there, and I think that's so funny to me.
No, did you ever see the movie? We had a really weird TV station in Detroit when I was a teenager. WGPR. I don't know if it's still there.
It's like public access.
No, it was just like it was actually owned by like I think it was owned by a black church to tell you the truth.
Okay.
And but they would run these movies that had had nudity and stuff in it. And they're on public airwaves. And my friends
Yeah.
and I found out about it. Of course, we were like 17, like, let's watch that.
Yeah.
And and they would run these movies. And one of the movies they ran it quite a bit because I saw it a couple of times, was called The Senator Likes Women or The Senator Loves Women.
Okay.
And in there, it was an Italian film about this Italian politician running for president, but he's been charged with like sexual harassment, and
I
then
just don't think it's so damn funny that like you guys found this sketchy TV station from a black church just for the boobs and
well, the
stuff.
thing is,
That's so little
well,
boyish.
it's
It's
probably
great.
one
Yeah.
kid at school found it, and
We
then
definitely
everybody.
would have done it. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and in the film, it's it's very it's a very black comedy and commentary on Italian church politics.
Sure.
What he does to cure himself of, or at least to change his reputation about sexual harassment, is he goes and takes a retreat in this convent. And then I think he has sex with all the nuns, and he doesn't know that he does. He's kind of delirious. And then they're trying to cover it up, right?
Mhm.
And what happens when they cover it up? The mafia gets involved, and the mafia will off somebody. And then what they do is they take that person and they basically cover him in wax and turn him into a statue in the church. And one of the jokes in the film is that you keep that up, we're going to make a saint out of you.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's been
but
brought up in the
but
Charlie Kirk thing lately too.
well, I
Yeah.
think the point I'm trying to get at
Yeah.
here is I think that's what power structures do.
Yeah.
Is they like with Dorothy Day, right? Basically, let's make her a saint so she'll shut up. And and always in I hate to sound so cynical, but always in I mean, they're kind of playing both sides at the same time. They realize the popular devotion or popularity of a certain person. Like even
Yeah.
I think that happened with Ivan Illich eventually.
Yeah.
And then they canonize them to basically defang them and flatten it again. Um, so I mean,
But but how about like an intuition I have, because I think what you're saying like isn't conjectural. It's like absolutely true. I'm not so sure. Again, there's light sneaks out of the crack sometimes, but the like in that movie, presumably, and this Father Ed Dillon, he introduced me, but I still haven't done it. Like the whole corpus of the works of like Luis Buñuel, these directors
yeah.
who that, this I'm probably gonna annoy people so bad, but like this epoch I think we're moving into, that John Cowper-Powys talked about Rabelaisian Christianity. It was all there in Rabelais. The
Mhm.
same time, he was cutting on the rad trads as soon as they were being formed right after Thomas. He said, and he gave all his characters the ability to do anything with just like illogically. All he needed was three premises, and he could create any moral code. He could do anything. So, and this is the beginning of the modern tyranny we're living under. But
Right.
the register of that movie, and that's why I think the way you found that movie is just so funny too. Um, Everything symbolic about that story you shared, connections to the earth and so forth. But ribaldry, humor is the theme that I want. That's the theme we're moving into, and that's the between a too literalist Catholicism, like almost a magical one, and
Mhm.
kind of a Jim Martin Catholicism. The
Or
world
the
of
rigors, right?
Yeah, the world of humor allows a blend, right? The world of humor is the same. It's there with hummus, humility,
Uh-huh.
and that we need. This is, and that's why I don't harbor much resentment. it's like people like you and I, we need to start saying, like, we know these themes. I'm not going to start beating up. I'm going to stop beating up on the skeletal structure. I'm going to use it for what it's worth. Maybe try and get some blood running through the veins again, because we're probably going to need her for something. This tradition of canon law might have something to offer some of these offices, but I hope she gets a good workout, is trimmed down, becomes a little more penitent. Probably not. Might be able to kind of morph into a more kind of a better structure, a little more representative. Who knows? I don't think pure democracy is the answer either. But
Right.
we need people like you, and I mentioned this medical clinic, to, with good fun and good humor, start doing these things. The Dorothy Day, sure, we would try to neuter her, but there's people like Larry Chapp. Everybody's giving her the fact that no Catholic worker house looks the same is kind of cool, right? And that's where the rubber meets the road. The people are doing things in her name. They're not worried about ideological purity tests about Dorothy Day. But what
Mhm.
Larry Chapp is doing with her legacy, noble in its own way, is very different than what the Zwicks are doing, who run that, who still publish the Catholic Worker paper out on
Right.
the Western coast. And so again, it different from Jim Martin's "Here Comes Everybody," right? The worst is the corruption, the best. We do need this very kind of localized, diversified church. I really saw it in when we visited my daughter in Vietnam, that it was so different, so
Mhm.
different. And I think the role of religion, which this Christos Ganaros, Husey, Illich, what's the role of piety? I keep on thinking, a return with the difference when we look at the Bible is this notion that the men are breaking bread together in the cenacle room, but they're pointing to the temple over there for worship. We need, we're going to have fewer priests. So again, we need more scattered communities doing things and going to mass with the bishop. And maybe the bishop could be freed up, Illich would say, from so much of this bureaucratic stuff. They could be
Mhm.
chosen again for pastoral, just great pastoral wisdom, and they could write letters that we could all be discussing,
Right. Well,
discussing things like, yeah.
you probably know the story of Saint Bonaventure, right? I like really love the itinerarium. I think it's one of the great
You
Catholic books.
tell me the story. Yeah, I'm pretty familiar.
But when they made him a cardinal,
Uh-huh.
they're bringing him the hat, and he was washing dishes when they showed up,
Yeah.
and they're like, Father Bonaventure, you've been you've been elevated to cardinal. It's what because we brought your hat. And he's like, hey, I'm washing dishes. Can you hang it on the tree over there?
Yeah.
Right. So
Mhm.
his emblem is a cardinal's hat hanging on a tree, and you don't see that very much.
No, no, no. You really don't.
But what I was thinking now you mentioned Transfiguration, then the
Yeah.
subtitle of which is, in fact, I almost took that subtitle off the book because right when the book was in preparation is when the McCarrick scandal hit, and I was ashamed
Hmm.
to be have my name to have Catholic
Right.
in the book, because I thought we were past that. I
Hmm.
was a fool for thinking that. Um, but when I wrote that in Submerged Reality, I would think I was much more hopeful than I am now about the
Hmm.
future of the church. And the
But that's just saying, it's honestly, I'm not exaggerating. That's just saying I'm less hopeful than I am now about my own future.
no,
But I'm serious about saying that in one
I know
sense.
you are,
But
but
so what
that's
do you mean? What do you mean?
what I mean. Well, the thing is, what changed for me was COVID
Hmm.
and the response of the church at that time,
Hmm.
and coming to realize, and I still see the same thing in evidence with Pope Leo, unfortunately, because I was hopeful for a second there,
Hmm.
um, that what you really see, I think, in the upper echelons of the Catholic hierarchy. And I think this is what Guido is kind of saying, but I think maybe Guido overemphasize the Anglo-American empire, and it's something even deeper and broader than that, though I think the Anglo-American is like probably the money engine.
Yeah,
That the upper echelons of the hierarchy seems to me do the bidding of the same guys who, you know, want 15-minute cities and the destruction of the West and who supported mass vaccinations for even if people would get sick
sure.
from it. and that of course put out, what did Pope Francis say, that getting the vaccine was an act of love,
Mhm.
you know. Um, but it seems to me that the upper echelons of the church, or at least of the church hierarchy, are all on board with that agenda. I mean, I can't not see it, because I don't see any evidence to the contrary. And and I just wonder, I'm starting to sound like, starting to sound like Guido. You know what? They're always 10 steps ahead of you. But,
Uh-huh.
but I wonder, that's what, this is totally honest, is that it's not that I don't think it can be reformed, but, well, I don't think the hierarchy can be reformed. I really don't. It's too big. Um, And I'm always like, like what we're intimating here is that, kind of a bottom up approach is, if you want to save the church, that's how you save the church, is from the bottom up, not from the top down. But as I mentioned with my analogy to what about Bob, even though it starts bottom up, top down takes over.
Yeah, right, right.
And so I don't know where that goes. I mean, I hope it just gets destroyed. You would think, I just like recently, so Pope Leo has been ripping
Your
on.
sun is coming through and obliterating. It's really stunning effect that makes you look holy.
I am holy, but
Yeah, I know. Whatever you want, though. I want to kick it back to you.
I just
Whatever your
being
publicist or
angelic.
yeah.
Uh,
Continue on. Yeah.
it's kind of cool. But anyway, so recently with Pope Leo ripping on Donald Trump and about immigration, for instance,
Yeah.
um, which seems a completely unnuanced take from what I can tell.
Mhm.
And you better believe. And plus, what you're seeing in
I think
London.
unnuanced is very fair, and I agree with you.
But I think, the thing that I've been thinking a lot about is like, at the Battle of Tours with Charles Martel and his Warhammer, nobody was saying, no Pope was saying, yes, we need to welcome the other.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So, now how can those two things be reconciled in Catholicism? I don't know.
Well,
But they're
one would
two
be again,
things.
yeah, they are. And again, hold me to your distinction, but one would be at least before we can deepen that conversation, we have to be so honest with things that not just there in preparatus corpus, but it's like very much the center. It's like radical Islam is an invention of the modern West. These are real academic questions. That we have our Catholic right just loving this culture wars approach, but they're just missing the nuance of what that we befriended these. I'm just reading one book. David Cayley mentioned this. It's just it would be like as if Glenn Greenwald, it's just called the COVID
Uh-huh.
consensus.
Okay.
If you Toby Green and
Okay.
but if you just follow those guys on Twitter, they're just like any good leftist reporter. So it's just they're going to win the argument. They say David Cayley mentioned it in these villages in Africa, people who depended on like subsistence gardens were just told to stay inside, like the total idiocy. But on the other
Well,
hand,
yeah.
this book called Carbon Democracy, I'm reading a lot about British imperialism now. It's by
Okay.
I think a Princeton historian. But again, he sees we just created or in early just discussions of oil refineries, that they before World War I, they just try to suppress those from flooding the market with too much cheap oil. Then they start developing it's just oil politics, but we Islam was a completely different beast before we got involved in it's the same issue as proxy warriors, right? Proxy warriors. Napoleon started using them. You kind of radicalize groups that just, wreak havoc in Spain. But I just don't think the terms of the culture war that they're given to us are illustrative of much of anything now. You know.
Well, it doesn't matter what the reasoning is, or in a way, it's the reality on the ground,
Mhm.
right? And anyway, where I was going with that
Yeah.
is you hear, and this, of course, these are kind of top, very much in the news, supported by the World Economic Forum kinds of issues, right? Whether it's mass immigration or vaccination or
Mhm.
whatever. or central bank digital currency, which is going to be that's the or digital ID. That's the answer in England. We're going to
I
fix
think it is. Yeah. It's happening
that's
in real
horseshit, right?
time. Yeah. Yeah, it
But
is.
but you don't, and we mentioned this before, right? I haven't heard. Maybe he said something, but I missed it. I haven't heard the Pope saying anything about the massacre of Christians in Nigeria.
I'd have to look.
I'd have to look too, but I don't think I've seen anything.
I think that would be, they're actually not, I don't
Or
think that bad on that stuff.
similarly to uh
Pope Leo on the massacre of Christians in Nigeria.
got nothing. Yeah. I got bupkis. But or
Yeah.
like we mentioned before, you don't, for all the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, they're posturing about the similar issues.
Yeah.
You never say a damn thing about the 350,000 kids missing,
I
right?
totally agree.
And
But
being
isn't this a continuation of the same conversation we're having? Like in one sense, you um yeah, Pope not recently, but he certainly has a number of times. But I'm not trying to defend that. You know me, because I want the larger point is in line with you. But you don't hear me, give me the correct tone of voice. But it's the I what you're saying now is exactly what we were talking about, the skeletal structure. Again, like we don't need to know how people are, this Jean Sullivan who saw through it all, this French novelist, like monkeys climb trees, right? These people are looking to play that game. But
yeah.
or we need metaphors. You're a poet. That when parasites draw the life out of everything, they too die themselves, right? But we got to find metaphors to so that people like you, I don't know, and you help me. I don't even want to give you a task. You're already doing more than I am. But what do we do? Do you think there should be like a petition circulated in Catholic Church? But I'm not trying to throw something on your lap. But I'm hearing more
Well,
continuity, and you're saying like all of a sudden here, that's a singularity with what they're doing now, that they've kind of sold out to the British and American Empire. To be clear, Guido would say it's almost like a document was signed, you know, that we will be the Caritas, just Catholic Charities wing of this, whatever we want to call it, the vested interest, the global vested interest. Um, and so I'm very familiar with that, but like still those of us who gather, there's some beautiful, like what inspired Dorothy Day and Ivan Illich not to apostatize. You haven't apostatized, but what do people like that with your streak do? Or convince me that we've entered a singularity, a total singularity.
I well, I think
Thanks for at least taking the question seriously, because I formulated it poorly.
well, I think the church, the Catholic, well, the hierarchy of the Catholic Church was, it had its problems for sure, but it was very different during the time of Dorothy Day and Illich, not so much, but certainly Dorothy Day when she first started.
Mhm.
It was, pre-Vatican II. There was, I don't know, it seemed, well, put it this way, pre-internet,
Fair
the,
enough.
the Catholic Church was less involved in politics.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And more interested about the Catholic Church. And about, you know,
Isn't it flaming out in real time?
what?
Like that whole structure. It's like a firework. It's good. That structure that Guido's talking about, where I think we're alluding to now, it's just kind of for me, I'm not trying, it's there in the Pillar Catholic. If you haven't subscribed, people should subscribe. These two, I think, Steubenville grads write a damn good national Catholic newspaper, much worth the Register or the Reporter.
Mhm.
But at least one of them, I think it's the Steek and Ed Condon. And forgive me, I want to promote them. I need to start donating. But they just follow the financial crisis in the church. And this Ed Condon's just a regular guy. And it's like me, he's not a bad guy, but he goes, I just don't see there's a way out of this. Or at the USCCB, I work for the institutional church. I think there's financial crises, and I work for it. So you'd say, why are they always hiding this stuff? I'm saying I'm not hiding it. I
Well,
think there's financial crises the skeletal structure, can't fix unless we get very serious and have a full disclosure.
so I think what we have are mm, in the structures of power right here.
Okay.
So you have the relationship and it might be through the Vatican Bank, and I don't know what the hell it is.
Pope
Of
Leo just freed it up again in a crazy way. What Pope Francis, they were involved in speculative real estate. Sorry about this interjection, but then, and Pope Francis, I think, was supposed to tighten it up more. But I'm sorry, Pope Francis did tighten it up. The Institute of Organ or the Works of Religion,
Mhm.
they were, real estate in London, Carl Becciu trial. I think he was let off. There's probably corruption at very, very high levels. But
Right.
I read yesterday or this week in the Pillar that Pope Leo like re-loosened the reins on speculative investments again, as if the church should have anything to do about like, are we going to invest in Oracle or are we going to invest in, it's all, as you and I both agree, it's all horrible, but it's flaming out in
Wow.
real time. Yeah.
Uh, but I so so I think it's a matter of power relationship. So there's that relationship that they have to whatever, the World Economic Forum people or the US government, whoever it happens to be. They got some relationship going on with those people, right? For whatever reason. However, it was, in fact, actually, every time I go to a used bookstore, I'm looking for some of the books by Malachi Martin because
Which ones do you need? I probably
When we
have
talked
them.
to James Tunney, who's
Yeah.
a big Malachi Martin guy,
Yeah.
he was really saying, "You got to read these books. You got to read these books, Mike." You know, so I've been looking for them, but I haven't found any in any of these used bookstores.
Yeah. See,
Um,
but Malachi Martin's reputation too, he should be a character in his own books, is my understanding. The author who writes on this is
I
that
met
E.
him
Michael
once.
Jones.
I met
Yeah.
him once. Wow, what a
Yeah.
powerful! He was a powerful cat.
Yeah.
He really
He,
was.
yeah. He, like they say, Illich had some of the same energy, right?
Yeah, his presence was
Yeah.
impressive and
Yeah.
imposing. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
seemed very. On the other hand, he seemed very kind at the same time.
Do a chat GPT on him, like with E. Michael
Woo!
Jones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but anyway, but the power structure. I mean, so where where does the hierarchy have power over the laity?
So many areas, but not as much as, I mean, what we've done is the image I have, Michael, is, it's because Old Boy's Life magazine, a lady is looking for a coin under a street lamp. And somebody asked her, like, did you lose it around here? She goes, no, it's over there, but the light is better. The church has us. It's almost as free as that. We need to look away. That church has our focus on all these things, just a 1 hour a week. That's the mass, right?
Right, but
Uh,
where does the hierarchy have power over the laity?
in that area, but we've given that area all the whole terrain in terms of we believe that's the only place the battle should be fought or that our fund should be exercised. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
but it's in the sacraments.
Right.
And that's what we saw under COVID is the hierarchy withheld the sacraments
Mm-hmm.
from the laity.
Mm-hmm.
And in some places they withheld the sacraments from the laity unless they were vaccinated.
Yeah.
And you probably saw I don't know that there were any in this country. I suppose there were, but
Mm-hmm.
there were some churches in Australia, for instance, that had signs on the parish door saying, "Fully vaccinated parishioners become a confession." Right? Um, but they kind of and I still can't get over
It's already the stuff of like Louis Buñuel films, isn't it though?
that they held the sacraments hostage,
Mm-hmm.
and the church, when given the opportunity, did not move into the catacombs,
No.
but stayed in the marketplace
Mm-hmm.
to appease whomever.
But what would you say about the number of priests, just like in the French Revolution? Read Balzac, And I'm not saying this proves its heroism, but having been proxy to it and also keeping a tight lip about a lot of it, the countless, a lot of these were young rantrads, by the way, but God works in funny ways, who broke ranks in all ways, all
A
the
lot of
time.
them did, yeah. A
So
lot of
many
them.
did.
Well,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say a lot, but well, probably a lot.
A lot. A lot.
More of the rad trads than anybody else.
Right, right, right.
But
Yeah.
certainly none of my parish.
And I'm not saying you're trying to bury this stuff, but like if we're looking towards the future, because without
But
that, I
but
would
it,
say that we have to throw the institution away, or what are you saying?
well, let's let so I think so. My friend Drew, who goes to a Pius X store church.
Okay.
and they were in communion. I think they're kind of, I don't know what their relationship is to the church proper anymore, but um and I got my problems with red treadism, as you know.
Yeah.
But um those guys don't have any power, right? So they went rogue during COVID. Um and that's what so and this is, this is a heretical thing I'm about to say. But the way you break that is you take their power away. And if their power resides in the sacraments, you take that away.
What does that look like? I guess would be my point.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying this
And
is.
who's the new don't and the people who take it away are immediately the new church as it, right?
No, I wouldn't even say that. No.
Okay.
Um, I
These are
think,
good conversations. Know that I'm taking it very
well,
seriously.
I think you could, like when I was, we're not doing, we haven't been doing it now because Bonnie's been taking the boys to church, but I ain't going.
Mhm.
Um, but when we were doing, and that's why we started doing house church during COVID.
Yeah, right.
I still hit, I mean, because the boys were still little then. They're 9 and 11 or 8 and 10, and basically they couldn't go step into a church for better part of 2 years.
Mhm.
That's insane.
What does Bonnie say about, as a parenthetical, what does Bonnie say about your current status?
Well, she gets it.
Good.
She gets it.
She wants to,
And she's
how would she
pretty,
phrase, and don't say anything about family. You know, I respect your family.
she's pretty,
She's bringing the boys. Why?
um,
You don't have to answer that.
and, well, I think because she wants to give this school a try
Okay.
and she wants to hold, she wants them to be able to meet people their age.
That's cool.
Um, and but she's got some serious problems with you people with the hierarchy. She's
But maybe that's where like the new church begins, that, weds to the old one is just people needing to meet people. Honestly, but I'm being totally serious. We haven't figured this out. We just need to get people together off screens and just start talking about real stuff, right? That's
Mhm.
about that's Simone Weil. What are you going through? What ails you? This is it. So what do we do? But again, I
Yeah.
think this is a good conversation because I'm deadly serious about that.
Well, I really and I talk about this so often in my Substack, but I think it's so important. For me, probably the most important book is The Mort d'Arthur
Mhm.
by Sir Thomas Malory. It just tells the whole story of Arthur. It's like, 1,000 pages or something. And what happens there is the knights after the Battle of Camlin and after Arthur goes to the island of Avalon to be healed of his wounds, they're like, I don't know what to do anymore. They lost their sense of self. And Lancelot even becomes a priest, and they all become monks. So they've foregone their real vocation for what they, kind of like, I guess I should do this because everything else is fucked up. And that's kind of really, I think that in a way describes the orthobroys and the rad trads who have renounced the world because of, despair or whatever. And it's better than nothing, right? But in light of that, a couple weeks ago, I rewatched one of my favorite films, Excalibur, which is based on the
Yeah,
Mordor.
yeah.
And
What's
there's
that
a great
director's name again? Is that an early Ridley Scott or something?
John Borman,
Yeah, Borman, right? Yeah.
I think. Pardon me. And in the film, there's this scene, which is not in the book, but it's something. It's a powerful scene where they're in search for the Holy Grail because that's the thing that's gonna. And I think that's where we are. We got to find the Holy Grail. But Percival in the book and in the film is out there, and he had been the page or the squire to Lancelot, and he's out there looking for the Grail, and he comes upon these pilgrims who are like nuts, like religious crazy people, like the Pignoni, like under Savonarola, like the Weepers, right? Oh, we have sinned, no, listen. And their leader, of course, is Lancelot, who actually in the book becomes a nut. He loses his mind after Guinevere and all that stuff,
Okay.
and he becomes like this religious maniac. and he gets this whole thing where he bashes on Percival, and Percival falls into the water, into a river, starts floating down the river, and he tells him, like, he's saying, "Let's let come back to us," and then he's one of the points he says, Percival says, "I can't give up hope. It's all I have."
Mhm.
Right? I
Yeah,
think that's
it's
depicts
awesome.
where
Yeah,
I'm
right there.
at, and I
Yeah,
think that's where the world really is right now.
that was a highlight for me.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think
well,
that's where
Michael.
we are.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, hope, hope.
That's
Isn't
all I
that?
got.
Yep, that's isn't that funny? Father Gerard de Souza, this abbot. I'm running. Talk about this funny melange between the institutional church, but I have to. My life is so weird, but I just got saddled, with run a men's conference. Well, I've never been to one. All I know quite often it's like famous
Pick
Catholic
up drums.
athletes.
What do you do? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So I just reconceived it, but I got I shouldn't say I got, I'm honored to have this friendship with Father Gerard de Souza, but it's the Jubilee year of hope. But he speaks on hope in a very visceral way. Maybe I could have these recorded, Michael, but when you say it's all we got, Jacques Ellul's best book, if you ask me, is called Hope in the Time of Abandonment, right? People don't talk about it so much. We're always talking about his works on
And
media and so
technology.
forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. But um Illich, um a video online you can find where he's talking about Epimethean man, but he's looking at it's not Minerva. Who would it be? A statue. I'm drawing a blank there. But this is a time of hope. Just hope. How do you think of the word hope? How do you describe it?
Well, it's for me, it's I'm in the wasteland,
Yeah.
and but I still, there's still, I know it's there somewhere,
Hmm.
the Holy Grail, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I know it's there, and it's interesting in the film. It's not, it doesn't go there like the way in the book, but it's a cool interpretation of the Arthurian myth in the film. Is after Percival finds the Grail, and it's kind of a very Jesse Weston, you and the Lander one, right? Have you ever read that book?
What is it?
From Ritual to Romance by Jesse Weston.
No, I guess I have seen it referenced.
It's
It's
a
usually
cool book. I
I
mean,
actually get those books and read them.
it's very much Sir James Fraser take on the Holy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I like it. I mean, I don't think it's true, but I
Mhm.
don't think it fits very exactly. But it's kind of a cool mythic interpretation or psychological myth or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but so in the film, Percival achieves the Grail, and he gives it to Arthur. He says, "Drink, you and the land are one." And
Mm.
Arthur's restored, right? And the first thing he does is he decides, I've lived through others too long. It was he say, Lancelot bore my shame, Guinevere my guilt, or something like that. Mordred my sins. And now it's time to get to work. And so the first thing this is when they go to the Battle of Camlan to fight the forces of Mordred, right? And it's really a tragedy because it ends in it does not end resolved, right? Arthur is taken to the island of Avalon by the three queens, with though they don't use the words in the film, the once and future king, the
Mhm.
Rex Quandam Rexque Futurum,
Mhm.
right? That I think we're in that kind of state right now.
Mhm.
There's I don't know what's going to happen, but it certainly feels like, you know, in the film, the collapse of chivalry,
Yeah.
the collapse, you could look at our own culture, a collapse of male agency, or horrible caricatures of it, of male agency, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Horrible caricatures of female agency on OnlyFans in particular,
Mhm.
right? Um, and it's like darkness. It really is dark, right? It's a time of despair, And what does Heidegger say that the how does he put it? The poet in a time of
Yeah.
destitution, right?
Mhm.
It's like we're in that, you have to sing into the darkness. And that's where I think, where the whole culture, the West is in right now. That's the entire culture is in that at that point. I don't know if it gets resolved,
Mhm.
but it certainly feels like they're at that in that kind of psychic space.
Yeah. I suspect the when I was mentioning carbon democracy or the British Empire, you get a sense young people today. So that is something for me, and I wonder what you think. Like this whole, not just the different media ecosphere, but questioning. They seem to be creating completely different narratives. But one aspect that I think I'm getting a hold on is, and I guess I want to think that perhaps the biggest crumbling I think we're going to see is again, there's going to be the nation state. I think is going to go. But I can't predict it with assuredness. But young people, when we think of one thing they seem to get, and when I've been reading, this is another book, Carolyn Elkins, like a Harvard historian, that could mean good things, but it's on, again, British imperialism of like the records that have been coming out lately. Last night I heard something about the Acadians in Nova Scotia, right? They had fertile soil. They couldn't really be trusted by the British in the 1700s to be totally loyal. So we're
Yeah.
going to break away families. We're just going to ship so many people, right? So this, but you get a sense that when young people, it was only 6 months ago, I realized that the Dutch East India Company, for example, was like the size of Amazon, Oracle, and five other
Yeah.
companies combined. But I think what we're seeing is, um, and when I look at how the nation states in the Middle East were made, it was all in the name of oil prior to even World War One, in one
Mhm.
sense. That the corporation, or when you talk about, what language do you use, the vested interests. But if that is an epoch where things are going to crumble, because the nation state for me is derivative of that. I think, when we look at things like the church, so when we see, one way is, that we could talk about you vis-a-vis the institutional structure of the Roman Catholic Church. But one way of looking at the decline of the Roman Empire was that people identified themselves with the church more than they did with like the fading political structure. So maybe there's so many things tumble, and everything you're seeing about the Roman Catholic Church kind of tumbles too. But
Right.
all of a sudden, there's a death and resurrection of like this way of organizing called maybe the parish. I don't know. What do you think?
Right. Well, I think I mean if you want to talk about the Roman Catholic Church writ large and compare it to the nation state. The nation state is actually a kind of ape or parody or secular version of the church,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Especially if you want to look at the globalist project, right? That's
Right.
that's the Catholic Church
Yep.
without God, right? Which is demonic then.
Yep.
And so that's kind of interesting that it's kind of a paradox that you're in that
Yeah. Yeah.
position,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And of course, all the values that the nation state or the globalist project espouses are kind of like we said at the beginning, right, or earlier with Pope Leo and Pope Francis seem to be down with the globalist project, right?
Or at least they've succumbed. They've said uncle, uncle, uncle.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah. And they fight back. They're in the cage and they do a good thing
they're
here or
going
there.
along to get along, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They might raise an objection here or there,
Yeah. And
but
there's forces in the Vatican
from
that couldn't love it more. They would think
yeah,
it's the height of progress. And there's others that don't want it. And there's also just huge power influences there. It's very human.
yeah, it is very human and all too human, right?
Yep.
As Nietzsche would say. Um, but yeah, how long can it be sustained? And they're trying to sustain it forever, right?
I think the financial thing is happening fast, fast.
It could be. I
Um,
hope it is.
Yeah.
But
Again,
I
it's
think
just
I
like
think that
he took
actually
the
I think
guardrails off like speculative investments at the same time as that like Guido's having bad dreams about March at the same time as like precious metals are taking off, who knows? And I'm not, and let's hope the whole financial thing is just an epiphenomenon, right? It's a world, but most of it's made up anyways.
Well, I think they know it's they're doomed. So that's why I think in England in particular, or the UK, they're trying to move quickly to digital
Yeah.
IP and
Yeah.
it's, what do you call it? Central bank digital currency. They're trying to move to
Mhm.
that as quickly as possible
Yeah.
because they know the petrodollar jig is up,
Uh-huh.
you know, or the funny money jig is up. The money based on nothing. And
Right.
it's like a whole. It's like our whole economic system is like a Seinfeld episode. It's about nothing,
Yeah. Right. Right.
you know.
And couldn't like government-backed digital currencies theoretically, we always talk again, this whole thing, if we've mentioned Guido's name, it's all about local like perishable currencies. But let's say if you don't have the petrodollar, you could be in government and see what's going to happen to the petrodollar. And you could honestly think, right, that like issuing government-backed digital currencies is a good thing, right?
You could, but I think that again,
But it
that
hastens the day of like the beehive.
well, that's taking. I think what they're doing with that is they're actually stealing the kind of anarchist notion of perishable currency
Mhm.
and
Oh,
taking it
I totally agree.
under
Yeah.
the power of the nation state. So they're using it as a weapon of control.
Mhm.
And it's, you better trust me, they're not going to use it themselves and their friends.
No, and it'll come with the social
Yeah.
credit system. Yep. But if I was like if I was working in government, let's say I got into that field, and let's say I knew enough about economics to say, wow, the US dollar is kind of threatened. I don't know what President Trump and President Xi are talking about this week, but we know it's not far removed from the discussion we're having here. And so the but I could see like if you just can't control, you know, there's so many dollars out there. There's so many dollars out there that you could be a good government functionary and want to institute government-backed digital currencies just as something better. It's a system that could be better. The obviously, when I would say perishable currency is completely and totally different. It's local. It's in line with everything we're saying. That's why perishable currency is the answer. It's in line with the regional flavor of Catholicism we need. It's in line with what we know that smaller political entities, if you had to shoot for where we should be, it should be a communion of free cities, right? We need people to start
Federation.
naming these things. We need these things. But perishable currencies would be regional, but would circulate. And the CBDCs or government-backed digital currencies or centrally backed, so CBDCs, they could be it's going to be monoculture, but they
Yeah.
could be seen as humanitarian.
No, I don't know. I am so dense when it comes to this. That's why I have to talk to Guido or my son Brendan, who's pretty wizardly when it comes to all this stuff. I saw something and it wasn't a whole story on news yesterday or the internet for sure. Um, about blockchain. And I don't, like I'm saying, I'm pleading ignorance. I don't really know, but
Yeah,
they were actually saying that actually takes the power out of the hands of the banks and the governments and puts it back into the hands of the people. I don't know if
it
that's right
does.
or
It
not.
does. This, blockchain, the Satoshi paper, it does have that potential. Um, Again, we'd have to have Guido on again, but again, I would much prefer that to government-backed digital
Oh, hell
currencies.
yes, yeah.
Yep, 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 yep.
I just don't know
Yeah.
how it works, and I'm
And if I said
not.
anything more about it, what interests me for some reason is like when we're looking at AI or when you look at the energy draw, the sheer energy draw for where we're going with AI, and also the sheer energy draw that Bitcoin mining takes. I always thought Bitcoin mining was a euphemism, and it kind of is, but it isn't.
Yeah.
There is so much energy usage. And for me, like who's addressing that, who's not, when we think about how compromised the global environmental movement is, and they've got us again, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. But how do we address the energy draw of things like AI? And,
And it's worthless too. I mean, what it
yeah,
gives you, it's not worth the return, right? On
no,
investment, not even close.
no, no, no. And these things are just gonna like implode all and then you have the billionaires trying to get out of here.
I
But
really
one,
think,
yeah,
my guess with AI, it's going to do like the dot-com bubble.
yeah,
It'll deflate
yeah.
because people are realizing this is not, what good is this?
Yeah. A lot of people think we've already maximized way higher of a percentage of its possible utility. And again, isn't it the question, can the left brain ever jump to the right brain? My understanding is no, it can't.
Mhm.
A thousand billion circles of nested loops with left braining left brains, if they're going to do it, doesn't link to wisdom, right?
Mm.
Um, but I could be wrong, but that's the basic, I think, thing we're trying to test.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Because when you look at scale, right? That if you test it gazillions of times, or if you test it once, these left brains are always going to left brain. Um,
That's true.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, I still like AI for asking it intelligent questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's more convenient and probably just as reliable, probably a little bit more reliable than Wikipedia.
Yeah,
You know what I
yep.
mean?
Hmm.
It's nice to aggregate things like that, but for much more than that, I don't, it's no, it's
Yeah.
not worth it.
I'll tell you a
But
true story, but I don't know what people say about it. But it was a quick anecdote about AI. It was on my own computer yesterday. I hadn't followed, and we could do a whole show, and I think we can both agree not to detour here, but I hadn't followed what the latest people are saying about like Charlie Kirk, who killed, what happened, which size gun things.
I have no
So I
idea.
used ChatGPT for that one last night, and I kid you not, the first line was Charlie Kirk is not dead. Wop 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 wop, and it went on and on.
Really?
Yeah, and then it shifted. Michael, I saw it, or maybe I had to. Now I'm spacing out, but but it's. I guess that happens because I've seen it give false answers
Hmm.
sometimes, like the lead intro line is totally way off, and then quite often the rest of the material is great, or you just kind of do a research and it corrects itself. But it was funny last night. You were saying, and that was an actual cutoff.
No, that was good. No, it's good.
Okay, yeah. What are you doing today?
I'm hoping it gets warm enough that I can go winterize my bees.
Okay, we did it.
Because I was out
I
of
shouldn't say
town.
we, but my wife did.
Before I left, it was in the 80s. I got home and it's been in the 50s.
Yeah. How was that conference? Where was it located again?
North Carolina, near
Okay.
Asheville,
Did you
which was
drive or fly?
I flew.
Cool.
And what was nice is it's in the Smoky Mountains,
Yeah.
which was beautiful, right?
Hmm.
And the little town there, what's it called? Willisville or something like that. Waynesville,
Okay.
which was really nice. I mean, they had this great Scottish restaurant bar,
Mm.
which I went to twice. And they actually had, even on a Sunday afternoon, they had uh, two girls playing Celtic music, which was kind of cool.
Well, that is cool.
Yeah.
Did you see much signs of the flood?
A little. I was really
Yeah.
looking for that. What I
Yeah.
saw, the only evidence was part of the expressway is under
Hmm.
construction, and I'm assuming it was damaged.
Okay.
It was by a river.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's all I saw. I was surprised I didn't see more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know about you. We have a gorgeous day here. I think you still have nice, uh, looks like a lot of sun is coming in. I have a sense today it's one of those days. I had my dog Jody in an old cemetery that's mowed like twice a year off the woods. And it was still, and then when the breeze blew just the least bit, boom, you could hear the leaves fall. They were so
Mhm.
dry and quickly. But if we got even one slight wind, the amount that would fall in 1 second. So
We've had a lot of rain recently. I don't know if you
we
have.
did, but it seemed to have it wasn't getting to the tops of the trees.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, enjoy. We
You
thank
too.
everybody for listening to the Regeneration podcast, and we'll see you same time, same bat channel next week.